Hey friends, it's Laura with Laura's Handmade Haven. Welcome or welcome back. I'm so glad you joined me today. So you may remember if you were watching the Let's Bake Quilt Sew Along, you may remember that when I got to those flower borders, I had way too many 2.5 by 6.5 inch strips cut to go around my cute little flowers for that border on the quilt. And I told you I was sure I would come up with something to do with those strips, and I have a fun little project for you today. Now I haven't seen a block done quite like this before, but I'm not going to claim that I am the original inventor of this block either. There are so many quilt blocks out there, and there are so many different ways and styles to accomplish the same thing. This is just my take. So if you have a jelly roll sitting around that you don't know what to do with and a charm pack that would coordinate, or maybe you have scraps like I do and a pile of them that you could cut some pieces from, why don't you join me in making this super fun, super easy, scrappy quilt? Now, like I said, I had cut way too many of the 2.5 by 6.5 inch strips for my flower border on that Let's Bake quilt, but I came up with this really fun, cute little easy block that you can make with 5 of those strips, and then you set the 5 into a grouping of 20 with one little square in the center, and you have a super fun 16-inch block. Now with those 16-inch blocks, you can go as big or as small as you want, and definitely if you just wanted to put these end to end, you could do that as well. This is just a very versatile way to use up some of those scraps that we all have lying around. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you how I'm constructing the sections for my block, and then how we're gonna bring all of those sections together into one block and assemble the blocks into a quilt top. I'm gonna keep this really simple today. I'm just going to assemble the 6 blocks and put them together into a quilt top and show you that finished 2x3 grid layout. But you can obviously size up the quilt to a bed size or however big you need it. And you can obviously size down if you wanna do just like little table toppers or something like that as well. So without further ado, we're gonna head to the sewing machine first so I can show you how I sew up one of these sections. And then we're gonna talk about the centers of these blocks, and we're gonna put a block together. So what I decided for my little blocks is I wanted my end pieces to be the same color, but the 3 colors in the middle I wanted to be different. So basically when I lay this block out, you can do this however you want. And if you don't want your end colors the same, don't do that. I mean, do whatever you want. It's just 5 2.5 by 6.5 inch strips. You sew the middles together and then you sew the ends on. Now, what I like to do is I like to chain piece all of my stuff just because I feel like I just get more done that way. I just feel a lot more efficient in my sewing. So what I like to do is just start with these centers, and I'm actually gonna put 4 of these sections together. You do need 4 of these for one block, so that's why I'm kind of going with that idea. I have the other ones laying over here on the design board, and I'm just grabbing 2 at a time to put together. This is one of those blocks that you don't want to overthink it too much. The only rules that I have for my blocks is that I don't want my end pieces to be the same color as any of my center strips are. And I don't want the same color, like I don't want 2 of the same color strips in the middle section either. And that's really the only rules that I have in place for my blocks. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and cut these off the machine. Put those back with their respective little friends over there. And sew on our last strip for the center. This is one of those projects that I feel like every once in a while, I just need some mindless sewing, right? And this is definitely one of those things because, like I said, I'm not really overthinking it. I'm just grabbing my strips and sewing them together. But it's gonna be so super cute when we get these blocks together into a little quilt. It's gonna be so scrappy and so fun. All right, so now that we have these 3 pieces together in the center, now we're gonna attach our end pieces for this section. So you're just gonna lay that across there and sew it on. And I'm gonna do that for all 4 sections as well. Now the end fabrics are the same color family, but they're not the same fabric. If you wanted to make in the same fabric, you definitely could. The other thing I thought about with this is that if you have a jelly roll and you just want to make these blocks up, you could totally do that as well, and then have more of a controlled type center of your blocks. You could just take 3 of those jelly rolls and sew them the whole length, and then cut them to the 6.5-inch length that you need for the middle portion of this block. And that would definitely be another way to approach the construction. All right, I'm gonna give these a good press, and then we're gonna talk about the center and putting this block together. On the design wall, you can kind of see the idea of this quilt. Super scrappy, super easy, super quick to put together, but obviously all of these little blocks with their little 4 sections need a center square. That center square is going to be a 4.5-inch square. So this is where your creativity can come into play. You could definitely use a solid center in here. You could use a focus fabric of something that you really, really love. You can fussy cut something to put in there. You can do whatever you want with this center square. It can be a solid, it could be a pattern, it could be whatever you want. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fussy cut out of a wide back that I had for another quilt, and that's what I'm gonna put in the center of each one of my blocks. So join me at the cutting table and I'll talk you through fussy cutting. Just the idea of fussy cutting just makes me kind of laugh because I'm always just like, oh, I'm just so fussy. Anyway, so what I need is I have 6 blocks, so I need 6 squares. Now, when I look at this wide back, I have a couple different options. I could totally turn the middle into just this like little X part here, and that would be super cute. Or I could put the center of my roses as the middle of my square. Or I could do kind of some of each, right? Whatever you want to do, but basically fussy cutting means you use something to focus on a part of your fabric that you want to be fussy about cutting out. And then you cut that out with the intent of using it as a focus point in your quilt. So I am going to fussy cut these flowers as the center of my blocks. I think that's going to tie it together really well. So I need 6 of those, and after I get those cut out, then I'll show you how to construct our block. So for one block, we are going to grab 4 of our cute little sections down off the design wall, and we're just going to lay them onto our board. And the reason I like doing this is that way I can remember which way I was planning on putting this together in my quilt, and that way my block is laid out. Now you can do this for one or all of your blocks at a time, if that's really up to you. I'm just going to show you putting this one block together. So we're going to head on over to the sewing machine and I'll walk you through constructing our block. Now if you joined me for the Let's Bake Quilt Sew Along and you did your little floral border, you may remember that we had to deal with a partial seam, and we're going to be doing the same thing for this block today. It's just a little bigger scale, but it's the same process, the same concept, and we're gonna get through it together and it'll be fine. And this is why I love laying it out on a design board, because then you can see where everything is going and how to get started and where to get started. So I'm gonna start with the center block and our right side section right here. So I'm just gonna take those and put those right sides together the way they're intended to be in the block. And with the partial seam, what you want to do is you want to sew from the bottom to, it doesn't really matter how far up. You need to make sure you leave at least 1/4 inch up here at the top though. So we're just going to stop right here, and we are going to use a stay stitch just because we don't want that seam unraveling. Partial seams can do that if you're not careful. All right, so now that gives us this entire lower edge to attach our next piece, which is the bottom section of our block. So now we're just going to line that up. Now I am being a little methodical with my finger pressing as I go along and attaching these sections. What I'm going to do is make sure that my seam for that middle block, that cute little flower, is the seam is going to be pressed toward that flower. So all of those seams are going to be pressed towards the center of my block. Now that we have that sewn together, now we can attach this section here on the left, the lower left section. And again, I'm just going to put them right sides together and sew my 1/4 inch seam. Now the seams for the end pieces of fabric, if they possibly got pressed the wrong way or not pressed yet, I'm going to make sure that they are facing out towards that straight strip. Now I have 3 of my 4 sections completed, and we're going to go ahead and add this last section up here and sew it along the top of this block. Now this section over here, you may need to let it fall back a little bit just so it doesn't get in the way. And this is why you don't want to be super close on doing your partial seam, because you want to make sure that you have plenty of room to get this sewn on, this last section sewn onto the block, and not worry about sewing into that first section. Now that that last section is sewn on, when it flips back up, we can go ahead and complete our block with this final little section, going from the point where we stopped with the partial seam, or a little bit back. I'm about an inch back. You can do a little stay stitch to make sure you are secure, and then we'll go on out to the edge. And that is our completed Scrappy Strip block. I'm going to give this a good press, get my other 5 blocks put together, and then I'll show you how to put together your quilt top. Now that I have my blocks together, I've put them back up on the design wall, and I kind of rearranged them and rearranged them and rearranged them a little bit more until I found just the layout that I wanted. And really the things that I was checking for was just that I didn't have too many colors of the same type together. So you can see there's a blue that comes together here, but these are totally 2 different fabrics, so they're perfectly happy and fine like that. So I just tried to make sure that I didn't have too many of the same colors coming together where my blocks are going to be sewn together. Now, if you don't want to have to worry about that, add a sashing between all of your blocks that is just a solid color or a consistent color, and that would tie them all together with a consistent fabric between them. So you could totally do that, and that would be a great way to break this up. The other thing that I honestly contemplated doing and then decided against was you could set these blocks on point, and then you would just cut your setting triangles for the sides, but this block is already so big at 16.5 inches unfinished that I didn't want to make it too much bigger, but that would definitely enlarge the size of your quilt, set these blocks off on their own a little bit, and really bring focus to all of these little scrappy fabric. So that's definitely an option if you want to take that route. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew these 6 blocks right together. So I'm just going to sew my first 2 blocks, my second 2 blocks, and my 3rd row of blocks together at the machine. Then I'll sew them all together, and we'll have a cute little quilt top. I'm not sure if you noticed, but I did pause and I was like a little methodical on how I took these off the design board, because I stacked them in an order that would allow me to sew them together right at the machine without too much thought. So these 2 blocks are the first 2 blocks on that top row. So I'm just going to put them together. Now you do have a matching point halfway down this block, so you can nest your seams between those 2 sections. So you can definitely pinch your little fingers there, because you know if I don't have to pin, I'm not going to. Now my second row of blocks are right here in the stack beside me, so I'm just going to take those and flip those over. Well, again, just lining up these top corners first, getting it started, and then I will work down here, find that little nesting spot, hold my finger, and then once I get to that nesting spot, I'm just going to go down to this bottom corner, pinch together again, and hold that. And now we're on our 3rd row of blocks. Again, we're just going to start the corner, get it started, find the nesting point. I kind of just apply pressure here. I don't really pinch on that one. I just keep my finger kind of pressed against it to hold it in place. And then get down to the bottom of the block and again, pinch those corners together. Now, since I sewed those 3 rows together in order, I can open them up and they are chained together with that first little seam that we just made between the 2 blocks in each row. And I'll flip them over and sew my first and second rows together without having to cut that little chain, without losing my spot. And my layout is going to be maintained because I sewed them in a manner that allows me to just sew them together in a chain piece fashion. I absolutely love this trick. I do this with my blocks all the time, and anytime you can use that for sewing a quilt top together, that is just such a wonderful win. Now, again, I pinched at that nesting seam. I'm pinching again between the 2 blocks because that's a matching point. And now we'll have another nesting seam for this other block. Now, if you have a lot of blocks in your quilt, I would not suggest you try to do this. You definitely would need to, just keep track a little better and cut them apart. You don't want all that weight on your machine, but for 6 blocks, it's going to be fine. We're talking about a 32 by, 32 by 48 inch quilt top. So this isn't a ton of fabric that I'm working with. I mean, it's quite a bit, but not a ton. And I probably will end up putting a border around this little quilt top as well, just to make it a little wider, but you don't necessarily have to. I think, the 32 by 48 would be a great size for a little kid, just for a little quilt, a little throw quilt. I do a lot of quilts for donation. There's a charity close to me that gives quilts to kids at Easter time. And so this little quilt is probably just going to go in that pile because it was just scraps and it didn't really have a purpose. And it was quick. It was like such a quick little quilt to put together. I love those quick little projects when you want to sew, but you don't want to have to think. And that's one of these. The only thing we were thinking too much about was just, colors matching and things like that. But I was probably a little more precise about that than I needed to be. I definitely probably could have been a lot more relaxed about those choices. I am going to give all of those seams a press and then we'll put it back on the design wall for a reveal. Here we have our cute little scrappy strip quilt. I am so happy with the results of this. It's so cute. I love it so much. I love seeing all the different little fabrics in there. Now, all of these fabrics that I use today are Lori Holt fabrics manufactured by Riley Blake from various collections. It was really mostly leftovers from the Let's Bake quilt, which is another project that I did on the channel, but I used scraps up from 4 different fabric lines. So these were extra strips that I cut out of my scraps that needed something to be done with them. So I just fussy cut these centers, built my sections around, used that little partial seam trick and built my blocks and put those blocks together in a 2x3 grid. And now we have a 32 by 48 inch little throw size kid quilt. And this is gonna make someone so happy. It makes me happy. So I know it's gonna make somebody else happy too, right? What do you guys think? Did you like this little quick, easy quilt idea? Do you have scraps laying around that you can use for it? Are you gonna make a Scrappy Strips quilt? This is so cute. I love it so much. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope that you may have picked up a tip or trick today that you can put into this project or another one you're working on. Until next time, find joy in all you do, carve out some time for crafting and creating, and remember it's always better when you make stuff up.